Right. Well, hello everyone. So welcome to another episode of a podcast session with Specular. For anyone who's not have come across us before, Specular is basically a community where we talk about different career options which university students and also recent graduates can take after they graduate. And the reason why we decided to start this community is really a bit of a personal experience. When I graduated from university, I felt like that community wasn't really there anymore to really identify which career options is suitable for you, or learn a little bit about different niche options which you may not necessarily learn when you're at uni. So that's how we started. We sort of started first during the pandemic, and we run sort of workshops around how to do a good CV, how to prepare for interviews, assessment centers. But also recently, we've started our podcast channel where we invite guest speakers from a wide range of backgrounds to talk about how they ended up in the current career path which they are at. And hopefully, by sharing those stories with students and also recent grads, you guys can learn about whether it's the right option for you as well or not, or maybe later on down the line you might decide to change career options, so that way you kind of learn about what's available out there. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you guys to our guest Tania today. We're so excited to have you. I came across your profile and I thought it's so interesting how you ended up working in cloud engineering. So I'm not going to give any spoilers, so we would love to hear a little bit about your background, and then I'll ask you some questions so we can kind of unpack how you ended up where you are today.
Well, thank you first of all for having me on this. I was very pleasantly surprised when I got the invitation, so that was quite lovely to see. So to start off as an introduction, so my name is Tania Mahmood. I am a cloud DevOps engineer. In regards to my background, I did a degree in mechanical engineering with a foundation year as well. Then did a graduate scheme for 2 years at the current company, and then ended up taking on a role in cloud DevOps. So yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you know what? One of the my background is also engineering, but currently I work in sales. So I always find it really interesting how people start off with engineering and then like diverse into so many other career
Mhm.
paths. So I was quite curious to know, like, how did you, or why did you start with mechanical and then sort of divert it into cloud engineering? Because although they are both engineering, but it's very different.
Mm.
So yeah, well, that would be quite.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It is quite different. So just in regards to how I started out, physics is something that I've always really enjoyed from a very young age, and
Mm,
then being competitive with my brothers is just something where I've always strived to do and apply in everywhere else in life.
yeah.
So with physics being one of my favorite subjects, and then being told that STEM isn't for women, or in regards to engineering is not for women, is something that I've been trying to fight for quite a while. So when it came to actually applying to university, I was a bit unsure. So engineering, the term engineering was familiar to me, and then I knew that it's something I'd be interested in. But
Yeah.
there was something else I was interested in as well, which was psychology.
Mm,
So obviously, having done A-level physics and then A-level psychology, it's like those areas, those subjects I really enjoyed.
yeah.
But I was fortunate enough during sixth form to be participating in a scheme called Nuffield Science Bursary. I mean, at least it was called that back then. So it's like a 6-week funded project where you get paid to do a research project either at the university or at a company. But because we applied so quite late and got taken on so late, we decided to do it independently ourselves in our school. So the project was basically to look at how we could use algae to create biofuel.
Okay. Wow.
But before getting to that stage, the initiative or the project itself was more specifically to look at like how can we grow at the optimum, like as much as possible of algae, basically by testing against different factors and uh, categories, etc.
Yeah.
So that was like a bit like learning about like plants and learning about like how it could be used for biofuel. And biofuel is a term that wasn't very familiar to me at that time either. But either way, what it meant after 6 weeks, the project had such amazing outcomes that we were selected by Imperial College to then represent the UK in America
Wow, that's amazing.
at a international competition called iSweep.
Mm.
And we beat out 68 countries to win a gold medal for the environmental category for the
Wow.
project we did. So obviously being at sixth form and being undecided between a engineering degree and a psychology degree, but
Yeah.
having done that project, oh my goodness, it opened up my eyes up to so much more.
Yeah.
And about learning about how we can harvest our own plants in the world, like especially algae that can be like is
Mm.
abundantly grown in different cases, etc. And you could like make it use and turn into biofuel, which can aid into global warming and help with the carbon footprint and vice versa. And that made me feel like, okay, that's something I want to definitely do. So psychology was out of the topic at that point.
Yeah.
And so then I basically started looking at the different engineering discipline, and mechanical engineering is something that really resonated with me, because mechanical engineer, you can go into the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
So it doesn't limit you, but it also allows you to learn about like aerospace engineering as well, or as well as like electronic engineering. So it doesn't limit you. It's more generic, I would say.
Mm.
So that's what made me pick mechanical engineering at university. And
Yeah.
obviously, not having done maths A level, I had to do a foundation year as well,
Okay. Yeah.
which I think was a good decision for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't really keen on maths before, but I kind of
You
was
got used to
taught
it.
to learn into it, like, appreciate it eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they went to university, did the foundation year, and then I basically decided to do a year in industry placement alongside it.
Yeah.
Ended up at a company, worked in a manufacturing company for a year, and then they offered me a final year project.
Yeah.
So the
Mm.
final year project was looking at like how we can detect defects in composite panels before it gets manufactured to reduce cost and waste, vice versa.
Yeah.
But there was this opportunity to expand or like make the project more robust, which was like an opportunity to do some programming to improve the image. And
Yeah.
I was like, I have no idea about programming. I've not learned about it. I mean, it's not part of my degree. I mean, do I need to know about this? So it really opened my eyes up again. So I had like the light bulb moment, like I
Mm.
did with that project before. And I was like, I need to learn about this. I need to know more about what's programming. What does it mean?
Mm.
So after finishing university, I ended up applying to a number of companies, but they were diverse. It wasn't just programming languages or like companies with software connections, but it was also like manufacturing, engineering. So whatever, basically, I was interested in, I applied into.
Mm.
But I was really keen to get that programming experience as well, either way, be it like privately on mine or be it through a career change, basically.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate, got onto a graduate scheme, which was technical, and they were willing to take on candidates who didn't have software, a computer science degree, who
Yeah.
didn't know anything about programming, but were willing to train you up.
Wow.
So that's how it all started.
No, I think that's so amazing. One of the things I get questioned about all the time is like, because I did a placement year as well,
Mm,
and it's kind of what made me realize I don't want to go into chemical engineering. But then what you said with the light bulb moment, when you do those placement years, it's so important to pay attention to everything, because although the actual, like the main program of the placement is, well, what makes up the majority of the time, it's good to like be aware of everything else around you, because you might find something that you really enjoy, and a lot of people kind of don't act on it. um and I always say it's a really good idea to do a placement year, especially if it's even 1 year, because at the time when you're a university student, 1 year feels like a really long time, but it's not really. After you graduate, it's like, oh, that really went so fast. So what would you say to someone who's at uni now and maybe they're like, oh, do I want to delay my graduation by 1 year, or should I do placement year?
I would definitely say like delay it, go for the year in industry, because honestly, it sets you apart when you start applying for jobs after university, but also it gives you go through the shock period, which
Yeah.
working in industry, working with actual people in a real life environment.
Yeah.
But having that shock moment later on, it's better to have it at university. So, you can, after a year, you can back to your degree and finish it off. And then, roughly what you've done, and you've gone over that learning curve a bit. Because for
Mm,
me personally, being at university, having had part-time jobs on the side, it's not the same as working in an actual company or like in an office with lots of people. It's not the same. It doesn't necessarily prepare you for that area, in my opinion.
mm,
With the yin industry, it gave me the exposure to how to even just interact with people in a professional setting,
mm,
um, let alone the technical exposure that I needed and I wanted. So it's like those little things that we might forget are important,
yes.
but it literally sets you apart. So a lot of the things that I've learned during my yin industry,
Mm,
the skills that I have taken on into this role, I get loads of compliments on those, just
mm,
because they're like, oh, your Excel spreadsheet or whatever, your skills are so good. I'm like, yeah, I learned it, because of what I did before. I learned it from people, that taught me the best practices. Or
yeah.
when they say like you're really like professional, you know how to, talk
Mm,
to people, how to get the information out of them. I'm like, oh yeah, that's because, I did X, Y, and Z during my industry placement.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, because it's the difference between a fresh grad who hasn't done your industry and someone who has, it's so big because you're not intimidated by that professional environment.
no.
Like, you know how to talk, how to present, how to like set up meetings, etc.
But it's also like you like mental preparation, like you mentally know you've gone through the period of learning curve, working in an environment like this. Now you know how to build on to the next stage, how to improve on basically.
Yeah.
So
And one of the other thing is like a lot of people actually find it is quite competitive to like land the job for even placement. Yeah, like in my uni, it certainly was like it's at the end of the day, it's everyone in your course. A lot of the times competing for one or two positions, especially at these big companies. Is there anything you did in particular to kind of set yourself apart from competition?
so I did loads of things at university, I'm not gonna lie. So my family lives in Croydon, so I stayed at home. I chose to stay at home whilst going to university, and I went to uni in Brighton.
Mm.
So I chose to commute pretty much every day back and forth.
God.
But what that meant is, when it comes to engineering specifically, we have so many institutions based in London. So you've got the IMechE, you've got the IET, you've got ICE, you've got the IChemE. In fact, all of them are based in there.
Mm.
And what that meant is that you can, as a student, if your university has connections with them, you get free membership, you get invited to events, you get the opportunity to network, which helped me. So I started networking quite early, literally from my first year. I started getting involved with that just because I lived in Croydon, I was so close to London. I was like, you know what? I don't know anyone else. I have no family members. I don't have friends in the industry. Like, I like to see what I can find on my own, basically. So I decided to take the initiative, got involved a bit more with the IChemE, which stands for the Institution of Mechanical Engineers.
Mm.
Started attending their events, which meant I got to learn about topics or whatever's happening within the industry, but also get to network with loads of senior people or people who are going through the similar stages as me.
Yeah.
Um, so that opened up my eyes up, but also allowed me to expand, the network or the environment that I wanted to get into ultimately. So that sets you apart because you've got the connection already. You're getting the connections. And then I started also volunteering. So I was STEM ambassador. So I did like volunteering events for an organization called Bloodhound SSC. They've been renamed since then. It stands for like Supersonic Car.
Wow.
So
Okay.
they were so it's a non-profit charity. So they were basically are aiming to set a new land speed record with the old people, like the actual person who set it already like a few years ago. I think it was like 50, 40 years ago, maybe 30 years. I could be really wrong now. It's been a while. 30 years, let's say 30 years just to be safe.
Yeah.
So we currently in the UK holds the land speed record in the world. It's like 600 something, 75 miles per hour.
Wow. It's
And they
amazing.
want to try and reach 1,000 miles per hour.
Mm.
With this new thing, so as part of like getting the people's public's attention, they were running like events at schools to get students excited for STEM and engineering just in general. They did like fundraising events, going into like exhibitions, like really big conferences. So as an ambassador, I got to go with them.
That's amazing.
So, talk about engineering, show my passion
Yeah,
of engineering to students and children and like all people of all walks of life. It was so amazing again. And that gave
yeah,
me the skills and the confidence to talk to people,
yeah,
irrespective of the background, and then start simplifying, whatever the engineering is going on really simply into that.
yeah.
So these are the things I did at university. And
Mm,
then obviously, the networking stuff that I mentioned. So that started, I feel like that started setting me apart from a lot of the other people, because university, a time where you kind of take a bit of a become a bit more relaxed, I would say. I mean, based on my other student friends.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but I'm not saying like go in straight away and be like day in, day out, meet people. It should be like a balance. But I think that helped me set myself apart early on. So when it came to applying for placement years, I only applied to one place. I didn't apply anywhere else. I was like, if I'll either get it or I don't get it. I'm not going to waste my time.
yeah, yeah.
And the only reason was, so my degree is very focused on, obviously it's mechanical engineering, but we specialize a lot more in manufacturing
Yep.
engineering. So that's something I'm really interested in as a result. But there's one thing we did not learn, and that was composites. And I was like, okay, I don't know anything about composites. I don't even know what that means. I don't know what the materials are. I'd like to know more about this. Having identified that, I found a company in Bristol called the National Composite Centre
Mm,
and applied for them. And I got invited for the interview. It was very daunting. I had to do a presentation for the first time to someone
wow.
about, something that I'm passionate about. And I did my project, in fact, my presentation, in fact, on that 6-week research project I did at sixth form, which was about oil and gas,
Yeah, yeah,
oil and stuff, biofuel, sorry.
yeah.
And having mentioned that at the presentation during the assessment day and having the interview and then explaining what I've done whilst at university already, I think they hadn't realized perhaps how much exposure I had already gotten, and they clearly saw something in me,
Mm,
and they offered me the role
wow.
basically. So that's how I got in.
Yeah.
But I was very determined. I was like, I either get it, I'll put all my eggs into this basket. It's
Mm,
okay if I don't get it. I'm not going to beat myself up.
yeah.
I like to try. And it worked out. And I had to persuade my mum to let me go for a year. That was another thing entirely. Because
Yeah.
I'm Pakistani, so my family's from Pakistan, so very strict.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I went for a year, and yeah,
That's amazing. Do you know what? One of the things that I kind of noticed throughout your story is you were always proactive, like even from sixth form, getting involved with things. And it always pays off because at that time you might not notice the value of this particular involvement with the project or the volunteering. But then later on down the line, you see yourself applying for a job and you can't just believe it, how it all connects. And I think that proactive element and always be willing to get involved with new things, it's so important. And it's something that I noticed with graduates and like uni students now, and even when I was at uni, a lot of people have kind of like a tunnel vision that they just want to focus on their modules and make sure they get as high of a grade as possible. And it's very difficult to kind of tell them that in hindsight, the difference between getting like 70% and 65% really means nothing in your career. Like, it's the other extra stuff that you get involved with that makes all the difference. The little percentages in your marks is not going to make a difference in your career, like at the end of the day. Did you ever like apply for a job where they were like, what did you get at uni in this particular module? And so we're going to give you the job because you got 71% and then another candidate had 65%.
that's never happened. That has never happened. I must admit, I'm glad it has never happened. I mean, I'm really
Yeah.
like, oh dear. um, so I think with that approach, I just feel like it's good to aim high. It's good to be motivated about your degree, because you should be. It's something that you're very passionate about. I mean,
Yeah.
hence why you actually went into university in the first place, spent all your resources and money and effort into getting that degree. So it makes sense for you to be passionate about it and try to get the highest possible grade.
Yeah.
But having that one vision where it's like, oh, I need to get a first grade in order to be whatever I want to become is
Mm,
all fair and good. But you need to remember there's like 90% of other students who are aiming this same way, who are also likely from so many other universities,
mm,
getting the same grade, the same degree, applying to the same roles as you. So imagine like if I'm just going to name a company like BP, if they have
Mm.
a grad role, I'm pretty sure it's like over 10k students applying for that role, just for
Yeah.
one role, for example.
Yeah.
And it really reduces your chances down. So it's like, what are the factors? What are the things that sets you apart from them?
Mm.
That's going to make you stand out. So it could be those little things that you've been doing, but in your back in your mind you didn't realize it was something that was setting you apart, I think. And
Yeah.
that's something that you need to kind of be aware of. So I
Yeah.
agree.
Sure. Cool. No, it's really interesting to learn about your, I guess, before graduation journey. Now, I guess l- learning a little bit about cloud engineering, I must admit my knowledge is quite limited. I mean, I've sold IT services to people, but never actually took part in the actual creation process. So maybe we can start with the most basic question, I guess, what is cloud engineering?
So cloud engineering. So I think there's loads of things to cloud engineering as such. So I wouldn't say cloud engineering is a role as
Yeah.
such. It's more of it's a big topic, and there's loads of things that sit underneath that.
Mm.
So if I had to explain the cloud, it is a platform that you could use. Imagine you have an iCloud, you have an Apple phone, you've take loads of pictures and then you run out of storage, for example, and then you need to store it somewhere.
Mm.
And then you have this magical thing called iCloud as an offer through your
Mm.
phone. So you can just transfer it onto that, and then you don't lose your data on the
Mm.
cloud, but you have the storage that you need on your phone as you go along. So
Yeah.
I would imagine cloud as in like a platform where
Oh,
you can
sorry.
store data, or storage basically, where you can store data securely, etc. Which means that you can then anywhere in the world access it.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be from your one phone. It doesn't have to be from your one laptop. It can be anywhere from the world, basically.
Okay.
So this is how I see cloud.
Mm.
And but
That's,
sorry.
I guess, from a perspective of someone who is completely, I guess, amateur about the whole topic. I get it. It's a storage where you put your like digital files. Where is this storage? Like, it's not literally in the cloud. So, where is this cloud located? Is it at the end of the day in a hardware somewhere? Okay.
So it'd be like a data center. So there are data centers globally who store it. So it could be like in a region where it could be stored, and then whichever provider using in the middleman
Yeah.
allows you to access it.
Okay.
So, for example, Amazon Web Services (AWS), and then
Mm.
you've got Azure. Both of them are Azure DevOps, which is the Microsoft cloud provider, and then Amazon Web Services, the AWS, as in like the cloud provider for Amazon. They
Okay.
have data centers globally. They
Mm.
have particular regions. So, for example, you have data
Mm.
on in the cloud. If there's some sort of like shutdown, when there was an outage not long ago when Facebook, WhatsApp, and everything went down, and they
Yeah.
were trying to recover and move on.
Yeah.
So what happens is if one data center shuts down, another can come up, and you're still able to move across, the service connections basically, where you're able to um, move on basically, and you do the things that you're doing without having some sort of impact. But sometimes it can be so dramatic and so extreme that doesn't happen, where there's a massive outage for whatever reason. So there's some really really like scary dark sides of the clouds as well. But that's how I try to explain it. So if you have something, it will be stored on in a data center.
Okay. And as an engineer, what is your role within cloud engineering?
Yeah, so I'm part of a team called Cloud DevOps. Um, I know we call Cloud DevOps, but it's more than that. So DevOps is actually a culture, is a way of working.
Mm.
So the aim of DevOps is really basically to combine, the software development aspect with IT operations, and try and sort out issues as they go along as well. So basically smooth the issues out and try and automate it where possible. So it's a bit like if you imagine like lean, agile being a culture,
Mhm.
DevOps is a culture as well. And another way I would say is like to shorten the time it takes to get feedback across to different people or different systems to get the issue sorted out, I guess. So if, for example, you have a software that has gone down and the customer can't use it, and so DevOps will be like, how do we approach this and get the information as soon as possible to the first person who's potentially worked on the software before, and if it's not them who can answer it, how do we take that on to the other person? So there's one aspect to DevOps, but the other aspect is like, how do we reduce waste, the impact it has on people, and how do we like take out these components that are just delaying us getting that feedback across. I think that's how I would explain it anyway.
That's interesting. Like, I've heard of the DevOps function before, but because like teams or like roles are called DevOps, you don't think of it as a culture. Like,
Yeah.
you think, oh, it's like a type of operations, or maybe it's of the
Yeah.
IT
Yeah,
process.
we're called that. We are called that. I'm not gonna lie, we are called that. Perhaps we should be called like cloud operations team. I don't know, but we are called this at our company. And so as a cloud DevOps engineer, my responsibility varies. So just to give a bit of more context to that, I've been on my role only for a year. As I mentioned with the graduate scheme, I rotated around the business a lot before I did my final rotation with Cloud DevOps and decided to stay on. So I'm pretty new to cloud in general and DevOps, and also learning and teaching myself and working with team members to get the insight on what we need to do to get, issues resolved, etc. But if I had to like summarize what I do, so basically we have incidents. So for example, just to give a bit of context, so I work for a company called Aviva. It's not the insurance company, we're a software development company. And we develop software for customers where basically it's for designing, building, operating, and simulating and maintaining any of large assets. So it could be like airports, it could be like even like oil rigs, oil plants, nuclear power stations. So we're talking about like really, really big platforms and big factories that are managed and designed using our products. So having said that, just to quickly give it a run through on that, the main aim is really to, improve operations and, improve efficiency and how we simulate the what if scenarios for our customers. We also train the employees, for example. An aspect to that is that we now provide a lot of our software on the cloud. And this is to, with the recent COVID situation, it's just highlighted how important it is to have the ability for customers to access the data anywhere, irrespective of what they're working on, etc. So this is where our company is very specialized in and is focused a lot on the cloud aspect to make that available to customers, to our products, engineering products in general. So as a cloud DevOps engineer, we have customers using our products on cloud. So they don't know they may know or may not know, I don't know, what cloud provider we're using in the background. So it could be like AWS, or it could be like Azure or any other provider, for example. If there's an instance where something in the back end, the infrastructure, something's fallen through, one of the resources is not working, or there could be potential impact on the customer, we get alerted. So we have a team in Hyderabad, for example, who are the frontline team. They're like the first person to see the aspect issues, and then they escalate it to us. So we investigate the issue and try and identify what we need to do. So obviously we have loads of documentation in the background. So it's not like you completely put in the deep end and need to sort it out. But you basically try and investigate the issue as it comes along, and you try and reduce the impact on customers in any way. Sometimes it can have a direct impact on customers. Sometimes it can have an impact just on the background, the working method of the product in the cloud, without the customer being even aware. So we have that one aspect, which is incidents. We deal with lots of those incidents. So it could be in any on those providers that I mentioned that we use, for example. Alongside to that, we do lots of operations. So we have projects where we do development. So we do like what a software developer probably does. So we have like scripting languages that we use to create infrastructure. So in Azure, you have we use something like Terraform, for example. That's for infrastructure as code. These are really big top terms I'm using that I had to learn myself as well. I would definitely recommend to read these up because you could do a whole lesson on that alone.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So those are like these areas that you basically get the opportunity to expand your knowledge and learn and apply your scripting knowledge. And you could be, for example, creating a notification system that allows people to be notified when their account, for example, in the cloud is about to go down, upgraded with the latest version.
Yeah.
Because as you can imagine, with anything, you have software updates going out regularly. Sometimes as a customer, you know, on iPhones, for example, I'm using iPhone a lot because I have iPhone.
Yeah, yeah, same.
On iPhone, you get told, you know, oh, there's an update. Do you want to go ahead or not, basically?
Yeah.
And then we click yes, and then we wait, for example. Sometimes we might not be able to use the phone. Sometimes we will be able to use the phone. So it's just minimizing the impact it has on the performance on the product in general. So imagine that way that our customers need to be notified that about time in a moment or whatever in a day's time,
Yeah.
the environment that they're working on will be down because we're upgrading it with the latest release.
Okay.
So that's just one aspect. So you
Yeah.
get the programming experience, etc., and then you get the incidents side on the one side as well.
Mhm.
And you also have the opportunity to basically do mini projects. So
Mhm.
any improvements that you can come up with, you can do that. So one focus is cost. So we analyze a lot of the cost impact that it has on the company. It also to aid sustainability. So if you can imagine like a data center, like a massive large data center that's being used to store and help function our products, that's unnecessary resources being used, but electricity that we don't need to use, and that's not very sustainable or environment friendly.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes back to the cost assessment and assessing what is beyond our running really what we really need.
Mm.
So it's a bit complex, I would say. I mean, it took me a while to get my head around it.
Yeah.
But there's a loads of like moving components, and you can specialize in any of the areas if you wanted to. I'm taking more of a generic approach because I like to know about these areas.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
That's,
So I hope it made sense.
yeah. Yes. It's really interesting because in some ways it's still quite similar to engineering in a way that you're doing problem solving, understanding like the whole, I guess, like the value chain of the process.
Mm.
Like one thing leads to another, which leads to another. It kind of is all tied together, and I think that's what makes maybe IT quite similar to some of the engineering fields.
Yeah, if you imagine like in IT, for example, on your laptop,
Mm.
you're working on it, and all of a sudden, your laptop shut down for whatever reason. You don't know anything, and you try to turn it on again, but you don't know what happened. You lost data or whatever. You raise an IT ticket for IT to sort that out. We, to an extent, do the same thing.
Mm.
This is what happens when, for example, something's gone wrong in that computer. Let's imagine like a physical computer. Something's happened,
Mm.
their IT wouldn't be able to sort it out because they don't have access to the product or how it's being stored in the cloud. It's us lot who would know that. So hence why we get alerted to do that. So we are responsible for keeping the system in the cloud healthy and available to customers more than 99% of the time. It has to be 365, like what's it called, 365 days a year, like, you know, it has to be all year round
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So we have shifts. We do shifts
Wow.
because we have 3 teams for all the time zones. So we do. Hyderabad takes one shift on the working hours. That's for Asia. Then there's Aslot, EMEA region, so Europe, Middle East, Africa, and then
Mm.
we've got the Americas team. So we are providing the support to cloud solutions that we have literally 24/7.
That's amazing. I find it really fascinating, like how, although I don't have a lot of knowledge, but every time I hear about it, I'm like, okay, I find it really interesting because all the technical details kind of like, okay, this is all new stuff, but I kind of track it back to like manufacturing days.
Yeah, literally, it's basically keeping your
Yeah,
manufacturing plant, like your shop floor, healthy.
yeah,
So you're still, it's like for example, you have one center that's, you know, building materials, touching things, and trying to
yeah,
put it all together. One
yeah,
person is assessing the qualities, like, oh, is this like, does this look good? Another person would be like, is this secure? Is there some health and safety like issues?
yeah,
Is the safety that go out? You know, what implication could it have on our company
mm,
or even on the customer?
yeah,
And then you release it to the customer.
yeah,
That's the process. And
yeah. So for let's say somebody who probably is going through a similar journey that you and I did, like they studied engineering, and they want to kind of maybe pursue like a similar career to like something in DevOps or cloud engineering or just IT in general. I forgot to ask you this actually. What was your graduate program? Because graduate programs usually are 2 to 3 years where you rotate different functions of the business, right? So I'm guessing was it IT in general, and then you kind of okay. So it'll be good to know.
Yeah, so so my company does different types of graduate schemes. So depending on what you're interested in, so they do sales, they do marketing, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of years ago, they did the technical graduate scheme. So
Yeah.
that's what I applied for. And the technical graduate scheme, basically, we have grads on the scheme who are math students, physics students, computer science students, mechanical engineering like myself, aerospace students, etc. So irrespective of what STEM background you have,
Mm-hmm.
if you had shown like the competency, or like you were able to pass all the assessments, they would
Yeah.
take you on. Basically, I would say that. So it wasn't like strict. You need to have a computer science degree, and only then you can apply.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it was a 2-year program, and uh, the rotations were up to you. So I could decide which business unit or which department I want to go into. What do I learn? What do I want to learn about the products or anything? But because I applied for the technical, I wanted to learn more about the programming aspect, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
So my first rotation was in TPS, which is like training product support. So this is like the team that develops the training content to train our customers on how to use our products.
Mm-hmm.
So that allowed me to apply my mechanical engineering, experience, whatever experience I had, onto that. Because if you've got AutoCAD, for example, where you do 3D designs, we have a product that allows you to do 3D, not 3D, 2D designs, but you can do 2D designs using our product, for example, as well. So applying that knowledge, how an engineer thinks when it comes to using a product. So that was very good for me to just learn the product from a customer perspective, but also appreciate, whatever I've learned at university
Mm-hmm.
is relevant here.
Okay,
It's
nice.
because the UI is very similar, the user interface,
Yeah.
it will allow you to basically pick it up as an engineer,
Yeah.
irrespective of where it's from, basically, I would say.
Yeah.
So I learned for 6 months a few of engineering schematics products that we have, and then I went in for the second rotation into development.
Mm-hmm.
I joined a team which was part of a big product which had smaller modules, you could imagine. So it's like, let's say, what kind of example can I give? So you have like an app, and then you have lots of smaller games in there that you can use, for example, to do different functionalities, and then at the end you can combine it all, like different components. Let's just imagine that. So this big product has different modules in a way that allows you to do 2D designs, 3D designs, allows you to do structural analysis, and then combine the whole model together to do a proper big
Mm-hmm.
um, analysis of like what a plant would look like before it's being manufactured, for example, or even like how it's looking right now. If I wanted to see what that component is, what's the data behind it, what documents are attached to it. It's like
Yeah.
real life data as well. It's very like fascinating. It's very complicated.
I think this program, technical or anything that's more like technical rather than soft skill, if you've got the mindset that you want to like break things down to like the core element and
Yeah.
how it works, is the right thing for you.
Yeah, so that's what happened with me anyway. So I learned that, and or learned C# programming for the first time. I learned about software life cycle as well, how we release the softwares to our customers. I learned about agile.
Mm,
Never heard about the word agile that much before. I heard about Lean Six Sigma before because of manufacturing. Agile was quite new to me, and just learning how the team work as scrums in development with the test teams, and how we manage the workloads to ensure that we are consistently delivering quality and security to our customers who are using our products on the local machine but also on the cloud. So it's like two aspects to it.
yeah,
And so that was really good. So I learned how to code. That was fun, just funky to see things working.
yeah,
And then I went into a team which is programming, but it's a whole new level. So imagine like you have like user interfaces, like where you do some coding and then you can see a real life change in front of you on
yeah.
the screen. but I decided to want to do some backend stuff. Like I want to see how it works in the backend in a way. So I would join this team that where it kind of had ins and outs of all the different products in a way, because there was common usage in the background of different components. So I wanted to learn more about that. But that meant being exposed at some point to Fortran. And I was like, I don't know what Fortran is. Fortran sounds so scary, but it's a very, very ancient language that does not make any sense. It's like really old code that was written like, I don't know, 20, 40 years ago, for example. And then
A lot of these funky names, like it's not that scary, but it's just like some random person decided to name it that.
yeah, I mean, in my opinion, Fortran sounds like a villain from like Transformers, in my opinion. So I was like, okay.
Yeah,
But it allowed me to appreciate a bit more on what goes in and how technical you can really go in regards to software development.
yeah.
And it really opened my eyes up. And then that's where I got my first taste of cloud, I would say.
Mm,
So there's a thing called GitHub. I don't know if you've ever heard about it. So GitHub is a massive, is a platform, is the like you literally, you can do coding, you can store in repositories. I'm not
mm,
going to go into too much detail because it's going to be too much info. But basically you can share your code with anyone in the world, for example.
okay,
And GitHub is, it's like a version control of how code is developed and how it's managed and how you work with different people from different places. So imagine you like do coding on your local machine, but no
mm,
one else would be able to see, for example. But if you wanted to share that, how would you do that? In a traditional sense, it might not make that much sense. But in this case, what GitHub allows you to do is move your code up into the cloud or to GitHub, and then someone from your team member can review your code without actually having to walk over to your computer to
okay.
see what's happening.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's how I would best describe it, I would say. So
Wow.
that was my exposure. And I got to work on a project where we had to make old code available in a way that our new products could use it. And that was to transform it into something that was consumable by other
Mm,
products. And that involved, uplifting it in a way, I would say.
that's so interesting. I'm really fascinated by. Learned so many things about it already.
Yeah, you just like, oh my goodness, how much more can I learn?
Yeah.
Um,
So I guess maybe some tips for people who might be thinking about applying for this type of graduate roles. I know graduate roles are very, very competitive to begin with. I don't know if they are any even more competitive or technical given the rise in the IT sector, and everyone is kind of seeing it as like the future. So everyone wants to like learn how to code, want to get into it. So yeah, I want to kind of get your thoughts about what tips you have for the people who are going through the assessment center or people who want to apply for this type of graduate schemes.
I think first would be to be clear what's important to you when it comes to working for a company. Like, what's the ethos that you can link or associate with. I guess that would be a good starting point, just to know that, I can imagine myself working there, for example, before applying.
Mm,
And then, so when I applied, I was very clear on I wanted to apply for things that I was aware already that I would enjoy, but also for things that I wanted to know more about, but wouldn't know necessarily that I would enjoy it, just to take the risk. And in this case, for the graduate scheme, it worked out. I mean, to be honest, on the assessment day, I thought I didn't get in because we had like this coding sheet. We had to move the mouse around or whatever.
mm,
I don't know anything about it, and somehow miraculously survived it, I guess, and got the role. So I think the advice I would give is take the risk, apply for something where you perhaps only meet even 20%. There's no harm in applying in a role. And as long as you can relate to the company and you're really, really interested in learning more about the product, because as you mentioned, with the vast interest in IT and cloud with all these companies,
mm,
companies now actively investing in their employees to be upskilled. So
mm.
I mean, 2 years ago, I didn't even know what cloud was. I mean, I still don't know to the extent what cloud is now. I mean, I'm still learning. It's just
Yeah,
been a year, really.
yeah,
But what I'm trying to say is take the risk, apply for it, be clear what's important to you, what company can you link with, and see what benefits you're gonna get from them as well. It's just like a
mm,
two-way thing. I hope
yeah.
that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. Like I can really resonate with that. And I think one of the things that you said at the beginning is you decided that this was the role for you, this was the company for you, and you literally put all your preparations and your eggs in one basket. And I think that's such an important way of approaching things, because what I see with a lot of grads, or even a lot of people who are just searching for jobs, they kind of just do it in mass. And when you do it in mass, you don't physically have that much number of hours in the day to like be able to put that much focus into your application. But also it comes across during the interview that you just want a job. You don't care what that job is. Whereas when you just really focus on one or two that you really
I
want.
mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting a job. I mean, that's what a university, after university, you want a job. I mean, any experience is going to help at this point.
Yeah.
So I think in that regards, I think honesty with yourself is very important. And as you said, like doing mass applications,
Mm.
it might be easy in the moment for you to do, but in the hindsight, if it's not specific to the role or to the company, they are more likely to shut it down sooner or not respond, vice versa.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I did that mistake after university. I mean, I applied to a couple of places that I wanted to get into and I didn't get into, and the rejection was quite hard. I mean, I didn't take it really well emotionally. And I
Mm.
was like, okay, but I really need a job now. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
when I realized, hey, I'll take any job as long as a job where I can, still get some experience. It might not be exactly what I want, but there's no harm because you still get to learn, and you'll know by the end of it, that wasn't a thing for you. You might not want to do in the future, but it might open up a whole new door to you where you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that I would enjoy that. So
Mm.
that's what I would say in the mind. Keep that in mind. The rejection comes naturally; it will happen,
Mm.
but it's how you basically pick yourself up again and move on,
Yeah.
and be honest with yourself. If it's a job that you want, you know, be ready to expect that you might not hear back from someone if you're just applying with the same CV, with the same cover letter to a number of companies and numbers of roles.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so I would say that basically, definitely that, but just like be realistic, be honest with yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I think you summarized it really well. Like similar to the placement year where the whole class is applying for one or two, when you're applying for graduate roles, you see even more people applying. And yeah, of course, everyone needs to have a job, right? Like you pay 9 grand a year for a university degree to have a job at the end of it. But whilst at the same time, to you, it's the job that's important. To the recruiter, especially for the bigger companies, they really want to see that you get their company, get their value statement, all that stuff. So to really like familiarize yourself with all of that and like take it in, it takes a certain amount of
Yeah,
time and effort. And obviously, the candidate who puts more time and effort, they're
it
just
will.
increasing their likelihood.
Yeah, because the thing is, remember on the interviews days, like all the interviews I had after university, they
Yeah,
all asked me about the life values that they have, and I was like, oh, okay, better
yeah.
make their notes of them. There were a couple of at the beginning where I didn't, be honest, I
Mm.
honestly didn't bother reading up on the life values. I just wanted to know what they specialized in,
Yeah.
and then went in for the interview. Didn't necessarily feel a connection to the company, if that makes sense, because I was aware what they did, but I wasn't necessarily aware on the culture itself.
Mm.
And then when the question came up, like what the value is, I was like, yeah,
And
that
to be
did not go well.
sometimes it's not even so much about the value, because if you speak to the current employees of those
Mm.
companies, they might not even be able to tell you on top of their head, but they just want to see that you made an effort.
But it's like getting yourself through the first door, isn't it?
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
once you're in it, then you'll see if they're applying it or not. That's a whole new different story.
yeah.
But when it comes to values or even just getting an insight into culture, Glassdoor is a brilliant platform to use
Mm,
to, if you, for example, like a company, but you don't know anyone, like if you wanted to know the culture or what the experience of an employee is, go definitely to Glassdoor, for example, to
mm,
get that information. I mean, I did that
mm.
to all the companies just to understand a bit more.
Yeah,
Might not have the same experience in the end of the
yeah,
day, but that's okay. At least you know something and you
yeah.
can
And
take that.
it's good to pay attention to both the positive and the negative comments, because
Exactly.
a lot of the time it's true. Okay, cool. Is there any other thing, any other tips, or any other points that I may not have had the opportunity to ask before we wrap up? We've got like one or two.
So I just sorry, I talk a lot.
really useful. Like I've learned a lot and I've really enjoyed it. So thank
I appreciate that. So in regards to advice to you as a user, as a listener, and who might be interested in cloud or just a role in the STEM industry, irrespective of what you apply, I definitely say be clear that what you want to achieve, I think, and be honest. And when I say honest, be honest with yourself. I was very honest in my interview to the company I'm working with, and I said I have no programming experience. I said it in my application form and then in my interview again, and that wasn't a stopping point. That wasn't like a showstopper for them or myself in any way.
you.
So remind yourself that if you in the application only need like 20% of the requirements, it's okay. Apply. You're not going to lose anything.
Mm,
And when you get to the interview day, ensure that you're also asking them questions that you want to really know, because it's a two-way thing.
mm,
It's not really for them to get to know you, to offer you a job. It's also for you to get to know them as a company, because that also allows you to sell yourself in the moment, and the company will realize, the interviewer's like, oh, this person really wants to know, like they're really taking this serious. So it's
yeah.
like there's loads of benefits to that. And if you specifically want to know about cloud and what would set you apart to get into a role in cloud after university, I would definitely read up on what DevOps in general is, what DevOps is.
Mm,
I would also look up into the different cloud providers there are. There's a number of them. I would also look into certifications, because if you start, for example, if you're really like keen on going into cloud, having done certifications, just fundamental ones or anything along the line that gives you a basic understanding of what those cloud providers are and how they work, will definitely set you apart by the time you apply for it.
mm, yeah.
And any experience to like programming, scripting languages, again for cloud and software development, C Sharp, Python, all the modern languages that are definitely like a high selling point nowadays. So it's worth investing your time and effort into that.
Mm,
And there are loads of books, there's loads of YouTube channels as well who talk about these topics quite in detail. So remember, those people have been at some point in your shoes as well, but have created, there's content out there that's targeting wherever you are at stage now. So definitely reach out to them as well
yeah.
and check that out. Sorry,
Okay.
that was
So
all the advice.
that was really, really useful. To be honest, I might even take some of that on board myself, even though I'm not in a technical role.
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, there's no harm in just learning. I mean, it's just fun. I mean,
Yeah, I
I
agree.
I did a project, was as a side project at work, where I was doing bouncing ball, moving around stuff whilst I was learning about C Sharp, and that was just like, yes, I can do it. It's just,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's a moment, yeah.
No, I agree. That's been a really, really enjoyable discussion. Thank you so much for sharing all the tips and advice. I've certainly taken a lot of value from it, and I'm sure people who listen, regardless of what type of career journey they want to go on, I think there's a lot to take from that discussion, and being proactive, always looking out for opportunities, putting yourself out there. There was a lot of important notes. So just want to thank you for agreeing to be our guest speaker today. It's been a pleasure to have you. And yeah, feel free for anyone who's interested to become involved with our community. You can look us up on specular.co.uk and you can become a member there. And of course, we've got YouTube channel, LinkedIn, Instagram, all the other social platforms where you can follow us. And there's loads of different tips and advice about how to prepare to land a job in different sectors, from clouds to sales and marketing, etc. Yeah, thanks everyone, and thank you, Tania.
Thank you for having me.